Thank you very much to all for coming this morning, well, afternoon actually. In the next half an hour or so, what I will talk about is the ecology of interdependent networks. That's how I define it, related to neural magazines. I will make a kind of short history of the magazine, which is celebrating 30 years of history this year. To briefly introduce myself, I'm Associate Professor of Art Design and Media at the Winchester School of Art, which is part of the University of Southampton, and I joined a research group which is called AMT, Archaeology of Media and Technology. But back in the days, I don't know if you can see the boy in the back, what changed literally my life was to start to work with an electronic experimental music label in Bari, in Italy. The guy who is here in front, the owner of the label, ran this label from there and was very internationally connected. So at some point I convinced him I could do graphic design for the label, and for some reason he trusts me. Don't look at the machines because I'm just pretending to use these gears, but I have absolutely no idea how they worked. But anyway, the photo is relatively cool. At some point I succeeded with him. We both had, again, passion with technologies in general, which is a kind of shared story here among many people. And what we did was to publish 1992 a thin book about virtual reality, 40 pages, 20 in English, 20 in Italian. And since it was a music label, there was a CD with music inspired by that and composed with electronic instruments, of course. Unexpectedly, in a couple of months, there was a virtual reality hype on the media. So we really all of a sudden were the center of attention. Interviews on weekly national magazines. The handbook was sold out in 6 months from all over the place. And then I finally could do my best bet and say, look, this has been successful. We can do a whole magazine about that, which was my kind of dream as a boy. So November 1993, we finally are able to publish the first issue. Just let me point out that November was 6 months after June 1993, when the very first Wired issue was out. I mean, completely uncomparable efforts in many respects. Just think that Wired magazine spent a whole year in PR to retrieve all the needed funding to run the magazine for a few years. And I mean, California, Silicon Valley, and everything else. So completely different story. But 1993 was very curiously mentioned in the previous lecture as an year of change, because it was the year that you could start to really experience the internet. My first email was active in November 1993 because of the magazine, actually. We had no idea that there was a magazine called Wired that was going to be there for any reason. The first issue, a first issue of a magazine really needs to be special. I mean, it's already special because it's the first one, and it will always remain as the first issue. But you want some special content for that in order to make it even more special and even more unique somehow. And we had an opportunity, which was, 30 years later, I think it's very telling about what was one of the strongest concepts behind the magazine, which was to use networks in the best possible way. And there's a fundamental infrastructure. And I'm not talking about internet as an infrastructure. I'm talking really about networks of people connected through technologies from wherever they are. What kind of content was that? Let me explain it. Yeah, first, let me say that the other strong concept was to have a magazine of evolving ideas. So we were making interviews, we are still making interviews to artists, for example, not that much asking them about what they are going to be in the future, why something in the past has been done, but what are the core ideas that they want to develop in their own practice. And it's the same for theorists and for sound artists, for example. So what happened for the first issue? Let me just tell the whole story. In 1992, 1 year before, William Gibson, I guess most of you should be quite familiar with William Gibson, the science fiction writer, without being labeled as science fiction probably anymore. In 1992, William Gibson made a wonderful experiment. He publishes a short novel called Agrippa in a very experimental format. It's a limited edition, very expensive. We can say it's an artist book, probably. And there's the text of the book, but the text of the book is printed on photographic paper, which is sensitive to light. So as you can see from the left page, the more you read the book, the more the book becomes unreadable, because it darkens out. Since the surface is darkening, the more is exposed to light. Moreover, beyond being printed on the different pages, he also attached, there was a small space in the book which was literally covered with a floppy disk. Well, I can see most of you really know what a floppy disk is. I don't have to explain to everybody, but for the youngest one, let's say it's the back then version of a USB drive with very much less memory on it, of course. What was on the floppy disk? Well, on the floppy disk, there was the entire text of the book as an application. But here the concept reiterates. You launch we could say the app today. You have the book with the whole text, and there was an interface, so you click to read the next page. But if you would pay attention, the moment you click for the next page, you would see the floppy disk drive animating and doing something. What the software was doing was that the moment you click to read the next page, the previous page was physically deleted from the floppy disk. So basically, when you finished reading the electronic book was gone forever. It was a very conceptual thing. Of course, there started to be word around on the internet. At that time, there was a protocol called Usenet, which we could say was the kind of forums more than social media of the time. So there was a word around of this experiment, and of course it was, I would say, very ahead of time and quite fascinating. And trust me, I'm not, there's no mythopoietic in what I'm telling, in anything I'm telling you today. At some point, we got an email from, it's nice that the hacker communities was also mentioned in the previous talk, from a hacker, small collective from Pennsylvania. Because we sent a kind of a pre-release short text on this on the Usenet, so on these forums, saying we're going to publish a new magazines about art and technology. If there's anything interesting that you think we should include, just let us know. And we got this email from this small hacker collective from a guy saying, you know what, we have the Agrippa's text on a floppy disk. Would you like to have it for your first issue? I mean, that was the most beautiful, unexpected gift we could imagine. And actually, we got the package after a week, without even asking. Of course, we answered, of course we want it. if you can send it, it's just beautiful. How they got the text in a very analog and simple way. They just put a camera in front of the monitor and recorded the reading and then just transcribed it. I mean, a very terrible hack in the end. So we got the text, and we were probably the only one, except this collective and whoever they were handing this text to have the text. And that's why we actually reprinted it. I mean, we hired a professional translator and we translated it into Italian. First years, the magazine was in Italian. Then it became, it was professionally edited in English and internationally distributed. We knew also that, of course we were breaking copyright of the book, but we knew that Gibson was very sympathetic with this kind of efforts. And he would have appreciated it. We knew afterwards that he liked it, and of course we sent a copy to him. So that was the start. And it's extremely significant, after so many years, because it was really telling about the network, the support that can come from a network, and the experiments that can be done in the printed form with digital technologies. So let me just mention, because there's a lot of things I would like to tell you today, but there's a short time, and I would like to tell you only the most important one. There are other things that can happen with the magazine, because the magazine is a beast that it's continuously evolving, and it's continuously done. You make an issue, and then as soon as you finish it and you start promoting it, you already have to work on the next one. So there's something that you can evaluate only years later. And this is another example. We wanted to make an interview with Jody. Jody is one of the, historical, they were called the bad boys on net art. It's a couple who did a very wonderful work in the so-called heroic net art time, and the second half of the 90s. Quite challenging work. We knew they were difficult. Nonetheless, they apparently accepted to have an interview with us, and we sent questions by email. What we got was not text by them. What we got were screenshots of the work that somehow was mentioned in the text. Not a whole screenshot, but pieces of them. So it was a kind of very cryptic answer, which was perfectly in style, in the same style of their own work. But we were wondering, what should we do with that? Should we publish it? How should we publish it? And in the end, what we did was we thought, we should just document it. And readers should decide what it is, how these answers are. So we just published the question and the answer, the question and the answer. I researched the topic, and of course it's not the first case of an artist who answers with pictures to an interview. There are cases well before this. But it's being printed is the only interview that Jody did this way, and it stays like that. And of course, it becomes something very valuable afterwards. And this is what I call accidental archiving. And what I mean is that this happens with magazines. For the pace that magazines have, there's a lot of archiving, because when you print it and it stays, as you can see, just turning your head around with all these beautiful books, it stays, let's say, almost forever. But you are not completely aware. It's not the same long process of the book. And so it's archiving, but sometimes it's accidental, as you have seen with this specific interview. Okay, 1997, we had the very first website. We were quite late, actually, in having them, but anyway, I'm still quite proud of it. And also for the website, we try to experiment with some things. In the centerfold of the magazine, we were just appropriating optical art, because the idea was also to have a sensorial interface to the magazine and exploiting as much as possible what you could generate for your senses from a very classic printed format. So for printed and digital, so we were having updates every other week, like an addendum to the printed magazine. In the very first, of course, we also wanted to have something special. And we found out this tiny shareware for Macintosh platform called the Bug Eyes. Of course, it works only on very old systems. It was a very simple another hack, and this was a sensorial one, but incredibly effective. So it was just, I can't show you how it works, but because you should see really in front of the video. It's just a kind of a disc with a spiral in black and white, and you are really encouraged to watch it spinning slowly for 2 minutes in a row, possibly not even blinking your eyes. After that, because of the contrast in black and white and how your brain processes the whole thing, you have a kind of a short hallucination. So what I mean is that when you look at your keyboard, for example, you see the keyboard kind of waving, even if it's perfectly static. Again, it was to challenge what we could do with this kind of new technologies through very simple means. Of course, the software was free and it was downloadable for our page. Okay, just to mention that in 2004 we received an honorary mention by Pre-Ars Electronic in the Net Vision category. And let me talk a bit more about what I call by the interdependent networks. The premise is quite important, and it's that in 30 years of publishing, we entered the 31st, the total amount of public funding that we have received is exactly 0 eurocent. And what I mean is that since the beginning, the very challenge that apparently we, succeeded to accomplish was to make the magazine sustainable through subscriptions, sales, and advertisement. So the magazine, even if obviously it was and it is a niche magazine for a very specific, it's very specialized in its audience, but it should have been sustainable economically through, let's say, the market. For possibly the idea has always been to have the quality as high as possible in order to attract this and not dependent on public funding. It's funny because, it should have been a kind of decision in the beginning, either to commit to make applications or to work otherwise. And recently, I even received some kind of proposal to apply together for funding or to get funding, and we refuse them actually because we want to stick with that as a kind of maintenance of integrity. Okay, first of all, 2002, there's a meeting which I was very enthusiastic to be part of in Seville, in Spain, of editors of printed magazine which were dedicated or had an important section on media art. The moment we arrived and we were sitting at the same table, I was already pushing them to form a network. We should formalize that we are a network and we support each other. Somehow, maybe they were just fed up and they said, okay, yes, whatever. But we did it and we formed the Magnet, magazine network of electronic cultural publishers. And for a while, we tried a few methods of mutual support, like having collective subscriptions, commissioning each other's articles, and so on. All independent magazines, of course. The best output is that we produce free readers about digital and analog publishing. And the PDFs of these free readers are free downloadable from the domain postdigitalprint.org. Moreover, one of us was curating a special project for Documenta 12 in 2007. It was called Magazine Project. It was involving almost 100 independent art magazines from all over the world. I was part of it, and it was a fantastic project, especially because all these magazines were not Art Forum, were not the major one, but were really independent. So it was a unique opportunity to get together and discuss the shared problems. Again, the network and network of support. Networks, this is the first of the two main and core networks that are interdependent and are supporting narrow for what we have developed. We have kind of reinterpreted networks as distribution infrastructure for media art. How? In order to use the magazine, we have started initially without even being completely aware of what we were doing, to have artists' intervention in the magazines. So to ask artists to intervene in the magazine in certain ways. And we discuss it because we know how a magazine, what are the possibilities of the magazine. And the artist, of course, knows about the art that wants to be in. I'm just explaining one intervention, but so far we are reaching, I think, 40 different interventions in the last 10 years, more or less. The intervention in 2016 on issue 53, well, actually I will also talk about another one, but in a few minutes, was based on the Pirate book. The Pirate book is a great book, very strongly recommended, made by two artists, Nicolas Maigret and Maria Roszkowska. It's free downloadable as well, and it's about different pirate cultures. It's also quite beautifully laid out anyway. At some point, they got the funding from Axioma, which is a gallery in Ljubljana in Slovenia, to also produce a USB stick with something on it. So what they produced actually, well, their initial idea was to put the PDF on it. And they think, why don't we attach this USB stick to the magazine? And I said, yes, but you know, it's free downloadable, so what's the point? If people can already get it somewhere else, we are just replicating it. We should think more about what we can do with a USB stick attached to a magazine. And after a little bit of thinking, they thought, and I was also pointing out, you know, the PDF, it's, I don't know, 400 megabytes, something like that. We have 8 gigabytes on the USB stick. Let's use them. There's plenty of things that we can put there. And after a bit of thinking, they thought, yes, but when you do a book, what you do is to gather a lot of material that you use in a way or another for the book, the sources. Why don't we put all the sources? Okay. And that's what we did. 5.15 gigabytes, the source files. The nice thing about these source files is there's a lot of material. Among them, there is, for example, probably one of the, let's say, highlights, is it's a video of a live concert by Led Zeppelin, which has been the very first file that has been shared on the BitTorrent network. I'm assuming that most of you are familiar with the BitTorrent file exchange network. So it was absolutely essential for their research. If you talk about pirate culture, that was absolutely, essential as a piece of research. But that video was used by Led Zeppelin to bring BitTorrent in court. So it was a proof of crime somehow. Nonetheless, we decided to include it in the USB stick. And after another little bit of thinking, they thought, okay, we should do even more. What? They consulted a Parisian lawyer firm. They gave them the USB stick and they said, we want a legal consulting, when you would tell us if you think that this USB stick is legal or not, or is breaking the law. After a little bit, they wrote a 4-page report, basically saying, we think it's legal because everything that is on this USB stick, you can find online. What we did then as an artist intervention was to scan the second page was basically it's written that it's okay. Printing in the magazine, and then, as you can see, stapling the USB stick with all the files on it. Which is already something controversial, but the best part is that we have an average of 500 subscribers. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but 500 subscribers. Among them, luckily, we have an average of 200 institutional libraries, like this one. Let me show off for a couple of seconds. MoMA New York acquired all the back issues, and there are other famous institutional libraries like, I don't know, Sorbonne University in Paris, Tate Modern, Tate Britain in UK, and MIT University in Boston, and plenty of others. They are subscribing, and as you know, usually libraries are committed to keep what they subscribe to. So I love the idea that this very controversial video of Led Zeppelin on the USB stick is very well kept by all these libraries. In a way, I think it's a system of distribution of these media artworks, because the media artwork, their artist intervention was an extension of their artist book, and it's preserved by these institutional subscribers. So we used somehow the infrastructure, and we are still using for the next few artist intervention in order to preserve media. But it's a supportive network. This network of institutional libraries becomes a supportive network for the work that the artists do and that we somehow circulate, mediate. Okay. Quickly, there's a second artist intervention I would like to mention, and this is a very preview. I would kindly ask if you take picture not to post them on social media yet, because it will be announced in 3 weeks. This is the 30 years anniversary issue. And for that, there's an artist intervention, which was another small dream that I had, and finally I've been able to realize, but not really alone, which is an artist flexi-disc, which is another concept. I teamed up with an electronic music label, which is a Portuguese one, Crónica Electrónica from Porto, and we teamed up with this idea to ask sound artists to give us, to donate 9 seconds of sound. Whatever they wanted. No questions, no editing. Very surprisingly, all the 30 artists that we asked, they all answered, yes, we want to. And even more surprisingly, they almost sent it within the deadline, which for me was a kind of one-of-a-kind event, you know, in 1,000 years. Anyway, they did it. We wanted to do it even more in a more complex way, but finally, the flexi disc is made by 9 seconds, 1 second of silence, another 9 seconds, and so on and so forth. So we can say it's an artist's record, I guess. And it will, they all donated. There are also famous names for those that you probably know, like Carsten Nicolai or Francisco Lopez or Jakob Kierkegaard. I mean, there's a quite remarkable, for us at least, lineup. And again, it will be sent and shipped to all these libraries, but it will be sold exclusively to subscribers, because the physical part of the artist interventions goes only to subscribers in order to reward them of the support that they give us. Again, a support that we receive from the network of subscribers, as well as the support that we have received from the artists. And it's a mutual one, because we are also circulating somehow their work, and it will be quite substantially promoted, and so on and so forth. And they are interdependent, because I would have never been able we have never been able to do it on our own without the music label, and same thing for the other parts. Okay, what else? Yeah, another important thing, network as preserving infrastructure, and I'm really happy that we are in a library here, the Neural Archive. There's another project that is equally important. I'm trying to be quick on these last two parts. In 2012, we started to think about the Neural Archive. What is that? Back then, in more than 20 years, we have received a lot of physical publications by editors, by authors, by artists who sent their publication hoping to be reviewed, but sometimes even not hoping them, just because they want us to have a copy, to know what they are doing, which is quite beautiful. But then we end up with these thousands of publications, very specialized on media art, with absolutely no possibility to make a public library in Bari, Italy, where Neural is and has been. And because, there would be no real possibility to make it last 20 years at least. And we had to decide what to do. And for us, it was completely unbalanced, because there was this huge generosity from the whole new media art community that we couldn't reciprocate somehow. And we did a very simple thing with quite a bit of an effort. Just an online interface that was commissioned, only free software used, commissioned graphic design. Archive.neural.it is the address. There are at the moment 1,832 publications list. No PDF files if you're looking for them, but all the details, including the content index, which is a crucial part of publications, because there are all the names and the titles, and the whole archive is searchable. So if you search, for example, for AI, you will find all the books that have AI in whatever form, title, subtitle, comment. But again, that formally is copyright violation as well. But we thought nobody will, claim that we are violating copyright just for publishing the content index. Very quickly, this book is a special one for the archive. It's called Art Plus Telecommunication, and that's been published in 1984 as a joint venture between Western Front, which is a video art institution in Vancouver, and Blix, which was part of a radio art effort in Vienna. So I had a residence in Vienna 2016 for 1 month, and I knew somebody from this institution, and said, by accident, do you still have a copy that you can share? Because I know it's a rare book, so I'm just asking. And the person said, well, I don't know, I have to check. And then we meet, and she brings a lot of books, including that one. And I was, of course, delighted. And she said, you know what? When you asked, I thought, it's true story again. There is that forgotten box at the very end of our warehouse, which we, never opened. I always remember it was a closed box. And I opened it, and guess what? There were 30 copies of Art Plus Telecommunication. So I'm very happy to give you one. So again, it's the network, it's the personal, in this case, contact with people, and it's the support that you receive by them. And it's interdependent, because without her, I would have never got a copy of that book. This is what I call non-accidental archiving, of course. If the magazine is doing the accidental one, this is really on purpose. Non-accidental, it's curated, and there's a lot of work to put all the data online, and we are, of course, continuing it. Okay, last part about the magazine, and then just a couple of words about a book. Last part about the magazine is that 2021, after COVID, we decided that we should have very seriously committed to make the magazine as sustainable as possible. A printed magazine can't be completely sustainable as any printed effort, because it involves shipping, and shipping is not. I mean, for goods is of course not sustainable. But we decided to make the best possible effort to make it sustainable. We nicknamed Neural 69 the most sustainable issue, and since then we are producing the magazine like that. So we try to address every single aspect of production that affects energy consumption. So it's not only about the paper, which of course now it's FSC certified when it's produced. So the mill, the paper mill is FSC certified. It's not only about having vegetable-based inks. It's also about turning off all the computers during the night. It's also about having exclusively energy for powering all the production that is exclusively produced from renewable energy. It's also about having the website with a hosting company that is exclusively using renewable energy produced by specific companies. So we try to address every single aspect. I'm not going into further details, but I mean, it also changed. The type of paper is completely different. We don't have coating anymore because that's plastic, of course. And I think it was a bit risky, but we thought it's exactly the way we should go. Finally, I would just like to mention that about all these things, I wrote a book in 2012, which was called Post-Digital Print. Very unexpectedly successful. The English edition, I think, was reprinted 4 times, and we had Italian, French, Korean, Spanish, and Chinese translation. I had. And the last news is that after 10 years, I'm so proud to say that there's a continuation of Post-Digital Print. This is my very new book. It has been announced 3 days ago officially. It's called Tactical Publishing, Using Sensors, Software and Archives in the 21st Century. And it's published by MIT Press, and the best part for me is that it is open access, so you can read it accessing the open access version online. Very briefly about the content, this is the very last slide. The first chapter is about the realm of senses, how we use our senses technically to read both on paper and digitally. The second chapter is about non-human writing, quite easily guessable. I'm trying to track a history of non-human production of text until the very last development. The third is about activist post-truth publishing. You might be surprised, but what we blame a lot now for the form it has assumed as post-truth has been used for activist purposes in the last probably 70 years. The fourth chapter is about endlessness, the digital publishing paradigm, so how this endless scrolling really forms a different paradigm about publishing. The fifth is about, guess what, libraries. Libraries are as cultural guerrillas, not only, of course, the very small effort that we did with the Neural Archive, but all the ways that libraries can become what I called cultural guerrillas. The sixth sounds very pretentious, how we should publish in the 21st century, but it's very short sub-chapters, paragraphs about a few directions of how what I try to define as the ecologies of publishing can be used now, including this interdependence. There's an appendix, and this is the very last thing. I had lots of fun trying to curate try to make an annotated list of 100 experiments of publishing for the 21st century. So examples from the almost all of them from the 21st century of using publishing in a very innovative and strategic way. Okay, that was it. Thank you very much. I don't know if we have time for questions, but I would be delighted to answer.
First, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you so much to continue printing. even if we have to buy some more shelves, our place, and you know that. I have a question that I'll continue, I'll keep asking, and because you have known this ecosystem of digital art for more than 30 years, according to you, what did change in 2021? Meaning everybody knowing that digital art exists thanks to the NFT, the Web3, and etc. So on your opinion, and I will keep asking to Martin and possibly tomorrow to Wolf and to other people, what did it change for you? For the best and possibly not the best?
The specific changes in 2021, 2020,
yeah,
2021.
Meaning the NFT craze. Meaning everybody knowing about digital art, even if we know that it comes from a long time ago.
I'm on a very critical and I have to say skeptical side. I was like that since the beginning. We were thinking about making an issue, and I was starting already to collect material about how, I mean, why NFT was NFT and the blockchain technology actually was a big misunderstanding in the best, let's say, as the best, if not much worse. We didn't do it because at some point there has been, I mean, there has been a crash of interest in them. I was discussing this yesterday. I think that there were plenty of artists, especially, and I think also some galleries, who were in very genuine enthusiasm of using this technology as a liberation technology for artists, so that artists could have managed their own sales independently. And getting out of the whole, I mean, of the usual huge amount of time that they have to spend in making applications, in getting grants, in talking to institutions, galleries, etc. I mean, I'm not going into the specific details. I mean, for us, it doesn't change anything, and I think, I mean, over the years. I realized that it's not that much the technological mean that you use. Because starting to make research, you see that there's, I mean, I can claim there's internet art before the internet, using a different type of international network. So it's the concept. That's why we are really committed to research and document ideas. And to finish, and even more to question even the blockchain as a concept. I wrote a little bit about that in the book. For me, it's a very unnecessary technology somehow, because the whole purpose of the blockchain, as far as I understand it, is to certify that an information is original. And it's not changeable. Possibly it's not even, you can't even copy it. Which is completely contradicting the nature of the technology itself. What I mean is, computers have been created by the military, again quoting the previous lecture, and the main purpose was to make faster calculations. And in order to make faster calculations, information, numbers in that case, could be copied. So this copying mechanism, this fact that information could have a copy, and this copy could be infinite in order to make calculations faster, which is at the very basic of electronics and then the digital, is completely contradicted when I say, no, it shouldn't be copied, because then it's not the original anymore. The original should be certified. I'm not going to talk about the ecological disaster that these infrastructures are accompanied by, But it's again, it's even this this concept that is striking me, and to connect it to the way we manage a magazine. Initially, I was very resistant to sell digital subscriptions because being, let's say, born with the internet, I always thought the internet has to be free and the content has to be free. Because you can, if the moment you access it, you can copy it. It's the same with music. If you can, there was a person in an American radio saying, if you can listen to it, you can copy it. So I mean, it's very questionable how you preserve the value of things. Or I mean, what's the strategy? So initially, I was thinking why I should ask people to pay for something that is digital, so it's infinitely replicable and infinitely distributable. Then I realized that was the principle, but the economy of the magazine started to be also dependent from that. Like the institutional subscriptions are way more digital because they are running out of space, the question you were also posing. And then it was important to have digital subscription, and then I kind of surrendered and say, okay, and now it's good because it's a very good part. But I'm still resistant. Because for me, the print stays like this. You can't go to a page and change things. You can't make a fake. Of course, you can make it digital and you can print 1,000 different versions of it. But once it's printed, it stays. And the digital, instead, it's a completely different beast. It's immaterial and it goes everywhere and it can be changed, it can be programmed with whatever kind. So this is mostly our position. But again, it's not like an ideological position. I'm always open to learn more and understand more, and it's not me, it's the whole people working for New York. It's exactly the same. So we also see that.
Hi, hello, it's Mehmet. I want to ask you about the pace of change. William Gibson said in the 70s, you used to be able to have a few years at least. By the time something happens and changes the society, you would have 3-4 years to write about it, write a book, publish it, people would read about it, and then the change would happen. So you would have that bit of a gap where you could speculate, as it were. And he could write those speculative science fiction novels that he was so famous for. And now it feels like the pace of change is so fast. It's impossible to be able to have an opinion and have it go to print by the time you be able to even think about it, you know what I mean? And it's just things have moved on, it's changed. I actually did ask this to William Gibson and he said, it's good for business, don't worry about it. But I was wondering, I mean, you publish quarterly. How do you deal with the pace of change? How do you sort of decide to publish something? Do you receive something and go, well, we've moved on, this is resolved, or this isn't even relevant anymore? How does this work?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. It's editorial policy somehow, and the pace is very interesting. Well, first thing, a magazine luckily is a live beast. It has to change all the time, and we changed a lot, of course, since the first issue, but over the years. And it has to do that, otherwise it dies. I've seen plenty of magazines that at some point they were stuck in their own model, because maybe they were just tired of trying to adapt all the time, and the moment you replicate yourselves, you die. I mean, it's just a question of time, because you can't cope anymore with what's going on. So the first thing is that really you have to be a different one every issue somehow. About the editorial policy, this is quite crucial and strategical. But the thing is, what is changing all the time, it's mostly, again, the technology or what is attached to that. So it's let's say the media landscape. How we select, for example, artworks. We select them when the idea behind the artwork or the ideas that the artist, for example, is collecting, and I have to say also another thing which is probably relevant, that beyond the anniversary, we have monothematic issues. So we establish a topic, and then all the artists we think are relevant for that topic. All the interviews are relevant for that topic. So the idea is that there's something with some urgency and agency that we want to focus on, and then we focus on it for a limited amount of time. And the idea is this accidental archiving. So it's, even if it will be, of course, let's say, expired after a while, the big effort is to pick up things that would last beyond the technology or the let's say, technical details that are behind them. That's again why the ideas. So that the ideas applied for that topic would last. And you would see them as relevant even when that technology would not be fashionable anymore, would really considered outdated. Looking back, when I see at because the beauty of having anniversary is that it's the very first time that you can look back and say, what the hell have I done? And the first time was 10 years ago for the 20 years anniversary. And you see things that you say, this was, I mean, completely irrelevant now. But you see also other things and say, this was good, whatever. A very short example, that Jody interview. That browser doesn't exist anymore. The works they did in the second half of the 90s, and now it's, I mean, if you show it to a 15 years old, will say, okay, what? But if you explain them why and the context and everything, it's still relevant. And that's a way, I mean, it's a challenge. Of course, you fail lots of times, but when you succeed, it's something that stays. And that's why the printed stays. And that's, let's say, the beauty of it. Yep.
Hi, İpek Yayınsu from Istanbul. So many artists are now working with archives, starting from the archives. So have you ever had any artists approaching you and asking you if they can use your archives and your magazine as raw material for their pieces?
I think a couple of times maybe, but it didn't, I mean, it didn't lead to anything. And but the use and reuse can be really nice sometimes. One of the funniest thing we got were a couple of fake. One was actually an exercise for a master course. I stumbled into it completely accidentally, and was a kind of completely different, I mean, very different graphic design, and quite a few tests on it. Nobody contacted us, but then I was pushing it on social media, saying, look what they have done. And another time was an artist from Slovenia who made a fake cover with an artist who was his friend, like an homage to her. And I think I got a couple of requests like, hey, I didn't get this issue. And I had to explain, well, you can't because it doesn't exist. But not working with the whole material. And the thing is that I don't know, I'm still resistant. Yeah, let me mention just one other small thing. As you might guess, I've been always in touch and very in touch with the hacker community, including those who are very supportive towards the shadow libraries. And I was kind of expecting one day or another to find the whole collection of Neuron digitized somewhere. It never happened. Not only because nobody took the pain of digitizing, I mean, almost 75 issues. It wouldn't take that long, actually, but because, and this is what leads again. Sorry to bore you again with this concept, with this interdependency of networks. The guy that I know, they know how, what kind of effort is this. that there's basically not an economy. I mean, the economy is a human economy that generates revenues that are completely reinvested in the project, basically. And they know that, so none of them took the effort of doing it. They would have done, I mean, in a couple of days. And for me, it's so significant that they never did, because they have done it for tons of other stuff. And I'm really touched by that, actually. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be ever. I mean, of course, I can't do anything. A friend of mine, an Italian hacker, digitized the very first issue and uploaded it to archive.org. It's still there. And then he asked me, can I digitize the second, third? Because they are very old. And I told him, look, of course I can't stop you to do that. But if you ask me, I will say, please no. And there's also another reason, and this is maybe very geeky and technical, but for me, I pretend it to be etymological, which is that since I still have the files, the original files, not the images, very unfortunately, for the first 9 issues, because, I mean, we were boys and poor, and we couldn't pay very expensive at that time storage for that. But I still have the original files, and I have the original files for all of them. I recently acquired a 1997 Mac PowerBook with OS 9 on it. And my effort is to produce the PDF files of all the back issues. Because for me, that's how that digitalization should be, not scanning them. It's a different process. And I think when you have the original files, it should be produced by that. Again, it might sound very geeky. I think it's etymological because if there's any digital original, is that file, and so the PDF should be made by that file. So again, there is no such a thing as a complete archive of PDFs yet. So even if an artist would ask, we should. But I would be happy to discuss it or negotiate it, of course.
If you need the Express users, they are in that room.
Yeah, no. Express, how do you know I was using Express?
Because I used it at this period of time.
That's what we use, yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.